How you doing, folks? Yours truly, Randy Rain here, host of today's talk. Welcome to the show. Today we interviewed Dr. Angelo Reynolds. He's out of Virginia. As a matter of fact, Portsmouth, Virginia, one of my homeboys out of the state of Virginia. And we talked about illiteracy and how we can fight it. And to tell you the truth, it was some good, frank, and candid conversation about, the state of public schools and what's going on in public schools with regards to our children not being able to read on grade level. And he has some good suggestions in what we should be doing with regards to fighting against illiteracy and how to help our children read at grade level, and certainly how to propel them into a better future, because at the rate they're going right now, it's not going to be so good. So certainly, I hope you enjoyed the interview. Again, it's with Dr. Angelo Reynolds out of Virginia, and enjoy the show. Thanks. We are speaking with Dr. Angelo Reynolds, and he's good enough to give us some of his time here today. Dr. Reynolds, with this phone call, has become a friend of the show, and I'll explain about that a little later on. How you doing, Dr. Reynolds?
Doing well. Thank you for having me, and I'm so glad that we were able to reunite once again. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm very glad about it, as we are both Virginia boys, and
That's right.
us Virginia boys got to stick together,
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Why don't we get things started? If you could please introduce yourself to Westchester and Dutchess County.
Sure. My name is Angelo Reynolds, and I'm doing so many things right now, but my background includes, a psychologist by education and training, an educator. I spent a number of years in the K through 12 domain. I spent a number of years in higher education, both in the undergraduate and graduate teaching programs. And I also had an opportunity to be an owner of an outpatient mental health clinic, where we were able to diagnose clinical mental health disorders with children, adolescents, and adults. And so I did that for a few years in private practice, but also spent some time as a D.C. police officer back in the early 90s.
Okay.
And it was in the police department back in D.C. where I really captured and became so interested in human care, but in a different notion. So I left the police department and went on, and then I spent 6 years in the Army as a lieutenant in the reserves. So I've been here and there, been kind of moving around, and so now, I'm taking it upon. I've written a couple of books now, doing personal development, recaption, and also now as part of a movement that is so critical. I want to talk a little bit about it tonight, and that is illiteracy.
If you could, please explain about your point that you made, and I'm quoting, the miseducation of America's black children, along with the environment, is the most single cause for our socioeconomic demise, and it is due to the high rate of illiteracy in the black community. If you could please explain that comment.
Yeah, and it's candid. And unfortunately, as people don't like to hear, the evolving problem stems from our kids not being able to read. And so because I had spent so many years from police work to military to education to clinical psychology, I understood just later on what the root issue was. Not so much that we're not dealing with mental health illnesses, but in education, the root of the problem is really illiteracy. Right now, in fact, the numbers have skyrocketed even more, probably since the last time you and I spoke. I mean, we talked about 68% of fourth graders in the United States not being able to read at grade level. It's higher now. It has to be a lot over 75%.
Wow.
And increasing. And so what we're seeing now is we know that there is a direct correlation between illiteracy, children not being able to read, and also juvenile delinquency. A lot of our problems, particularly in the school systems, are stemming from children not being able to read. And so because I spent so much time in the classroom, particularly K through 12 in the last 3 or 4 years as a consultant, it was a direct response to observation and seeing, hey, these guys are not bad kids. These boys aren't bad, but they can't read. And so if you have Johnny in class, and Johnny's a good kid, but Johnny doesn't understand the academic instruction. And so what Johnny does, he acts out because Johnny can't read. What we've done is we've tend to go over the mere fact that children can't read, and we try to put these small bandages on a real sore that is yet to be healed. And that's sort of where we are now.
Now, upon preparing for this interview, I read your statement that up to 87% of our children in America can't read at goal. That's astonishingly bad. Now, fixing the problem is an enormous task. What are some suggestions you can offer to get started fixing this problem?
Yeah. Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to go back to the basics. See, we've gotten so far away from the basic acquisitions of phonics. And probably you and I probably learned through phonics. Mm-hmm. Because once you're able to see, schools now, they change these curriculums. They put all of these Common Core and all these very strenuous curriculums that are supposed to be better for academic achievement in the country. But what they fail to realize, so many kids can't read at grade level. And so what we have to do is go back to the basics. We have to go back to the phonics, the sound acquisition, the spelling, the reading acquisition and comprehension. And we're doing this, and the reason why more of our kids are going to continue to fail is because you're trying to impose an academic core curriculum of response to a problem that still exists, and that is illiteracy. The kids cannot read. And so as an educator, we say, oh, this is supposed to be more challenging now. The Common Core, and if you've kept up with Common Core, you'll see that some of the states have opted to use it. In fact, I think Virginia, over where I am, Kentucky, and a few other states decided that they were going to opt out of Common Core because they felt like kids would become failures because they have a problem with reading deficiencies. So, when we talk about that, we have to go back to the basics, and that is the problem right now that we're dealing with. By the time now the statistics are showing that prisons are being built for black boys because they can't read at the age of 3rd grade. It used to be 4th grade. Now they've taken it up a grade. If they can't read by 3rd grade, we're going to build X amount of juvenile delinquent detention centers and then prisons. And that is statistically correct, and that's what we're looking at right now. And that's a serious problem.
It is. It is a very serious problem. As a matter of fact, it's so serious, it's an issue that, we could sit there and do a whole different interview on, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
That's astonishing. They're looking at results of 3rd grade boys and using that criteria, criteria on how many prisons they're about to build. That tells you right there that something in the system is rigged.
Yeah, because the problem comes in is that by the time kids get to the 4th grade, if they don't have a very strenuous, strict intervention to increase their reading, by the time they get to middle school, we lose them.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you right now, it speaks to the level of high school dropouts. By the time kids get to high school, if they aren't reading on grade level, they never will.
Yeah.
And that is a serious problem now. But listen, there's no reason why with the technology age that we have now, the softwares and the computers, that children can't have some extra intervention at home on computers. We have interventions now. We just have to take the time out to sit with children and make sure they get it. I cannot depend on the school system to teach my kids how to read.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We can't do that. And because there was a time where you and I went to school and parents would feel a lot more comfortable with the teaching in the school systems than we do now. We send these kids out here and we say, you know what, she'll be fine, he'll be fine. But when Johnny brings these grades home, we're like, what is going on? But Johnny can't read. And that's the problem. Yeah.
We're speaking
Yeah.
with Dr. Angelo Reynolds, and he's been gracious enough to give us some of his time today. You kind of leading me right into my next question, which is, in your view, who would you say is to blame for this horrific situation, and is there enough blame to go around?
Well, I think blame may be a little punitive, but maybe politically correct if you
Mm-hmm.
look at education.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is we have to be accountable. It's not so much about the blaming game. I think that we all have to be accountable. As a parent, it's first and foremost that I am accountable to make sure that when my sons leave this house, that they are equipped with some basic things so when they go in the classrooms, they're not lost. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
When they get to school, I'm also holding the school system accountable to make sure that if they need assistance while they're teaching them, they get that. So I think it's twofold. I think parents have to be accountable, and I think the school system have to be accountable. But remember, the school system is so, and I hate to use this word, it's ragged now. It's garbage. The school systems now are ruining our children. Listen, I talk to schools all the time, and I say to people, and they don't like it. I don't care because somebody's got to say it. And I say, these kids are our future. Well, how can the children be our future if they're functionally illiterate? See, I don't know if you know my story, but I was functionally illiterate as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that until I got to college.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that I was pushed through school all this time, and then when I get to college, I'm taking these prerequisite courses. So I'm like, what is prerequisite courses? It's because I couldn't read on the college level because I was functionally illiterate. But you know what they did? They passed me through. You know what they're doing now? They're passing kids through.
Social promotion.
So, social promotion is a huge thing. And I had a dispute with the teacher one day. She says, "Oh, well, we have social promotion." I said, "Let me ask you something. Do you think it's more detrimental because you don't want to hurt a kid's feelings because socially you want to promote him, or you think it's more detrimental that you promote him and he's functionally illiterate?" Because guess what? When these kids come out and they're functionally illiterate, it's all of our problems.
Yep.
Because these are the same kids that are in our communities around our children and our families, and these are the same kids that when you go out, you have to deal with your family.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think it's so much about a blame game. It's more about accountability. And if educators and so-called educators were to really take this root of the problem about illiteracy seriously, they would know that you should not promote a child if he or she cannot read at grade level. And that's where we are now. No one wants to, superintendents and principals. We had some down here in the school district, a principal, she got principal of the year. How can you accept an award as a principal of the year and you're in the lowest tier of reading in the county?
Oh my God.
You see, she should be fired. She should quit because she's doing a disservice. Yeah, you get an award and you're sticking your chest out because you want to get promoted, but
Yeah.
your children can't read. So that's not just here, that's across the country. So that's where that number comes in at 87%, and actually it's even higher now because I was looking at some statistics in the Department of Education. Now they're talking about 8 and 9 out of 10 kids, 9 out of 10 kids cannot read at grade level across the country. So the numbers are constantly rising because we're doing less as educators.
I want to ask you a side question. A side question meaning it's not in my original list of questions. But I'm a longtime proponent. I'm a big-time advocate for black churches and the black community educating their own kids. There,
Yeah.
I said it. I know, it doesn't really wear well with a lot of people, but I feel that's where we are. Where do you think? What do you think about that?
In terms of churches' role or what they can do or should be doing?
Yeah, well, let me further explain.
Okay.
I read an article, actually I saw an article the other day talking about how black people, when they attend church every Sunday and they, contribute or put in about $500 million into the church plates and all over the country every Sunday. And of course, the church puts the money in the banks. And these banks won't give blacks loans. They won't help us out, so forth and so on.
Mm.
And the thing is, I'm thinking, black people, we as black people, I mean, I'm not going to say we've overcome, but man, we certainly aren't where we were many, many years ago.
That's right.
We have a lot of money. We are responsible for $1 trillion spending a
That's
year.
right. That's right. That's right.
Why in the world can't we build our own schools, whether it be through the churches or other civic organizations or community organizations? Why can't we do that?
I don't think it's why we can't. It's just that we don't think it's that important. See, unfortunately, we have it's different now. The churches that a lot, I'm not going to say all, but many of the churches now, it's about instant gratification. It's about what you can do for me and less what I do for the community. Listen, if churches took an active role in tackling this illiteracy piece, do you know how many parents,
Yep.
not just children,
Yeah.
how many parents are sitting in church who open their Bible, but they are functionally illiterate?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, the pastor's preaching, and they're trying to follow him, but he or she are functionally illiterate.
Yeah. Can't read.
And so this, it would be grand if churches would partake in really tackling the illiteracy piece. Listen, we're the biggest proponents of Christian religion and congregation and coming together. Like you just mentioned, giving so much money back to the church. What has the church given to start their own schools, start their own reading program? We have now resources where you can start your own reading center right in the church.
Yeah.
Why haven't we done that when so many times it has been approached to pastors and bishops and so forth, and they stray away from that? And it goes back to what you asked me earlier about accountability. I'm not going to blame the pastor, but I'm going to hold him accountable if 60% of the people in your church are functionally illiterate. Whose fault is that? If you're preaching the word and your kids and your parents can't read, whose fault is that? That's the pastor's fault. And he needs to take accountability. And I think, to get right to your question, to answer that, I think we haven't taken the accountability. And when you don't do that, you do nothing to impact your community.
Now, I want to switch gears a little bit. If you could, because you mentioned a moment ago, when you were coming up, if you could please speak to the frustrations you experienced early on in your life and how it created the drive you have now.
Yeah. Well, my situation really stemmed from, the whole poverty-stricken environment, negative environment in the ghetto. And so for me, I'm telling you, for years, I always liked school, but I always did poorly. And it wasn't until later on that I understood why I performed so poorly in school. It wasn't because I didn't want to do better. It wasn't because I didn't have an interest to do better, but it was because, and I didn't know it at that time, I couldn't read. And when I say read, I want listeners to understand, I don't mean read just to be reading. I'm talking about reading and being able to regurgitate, comprehend, and regurgitate what you read. That's comprehension. Mm-hmm. And for a long time, I can do that. So I was frustrated. Listen, I ended up a couple of years ago, maybe about a year ago, I went and got my test scores, reading scores from first grade until I graduated. And you know what I discovered? I sat down with a reading specialist, and we went over the data, the raw scores. And this is a true story. I'm not making this up. She would go through it, and she said, well, when you was in the fourth grade, you read on a second grade level, and then she said when you was in the sixth grade, you read on a fourth grade level, but by the time you got to the ninth grade, you were still at a seventh grade level, and she said when you got to the 12th grade, you were reading about a 9.5, 10th grade level. So I said, you got to be kidding me. So she said, no. So I said, well, what's the chances of this person becoming successful in life, a doctor, lawyer, et cetera, et cetera? She said, slim to none.
Wow.
So I don't say that in a boastful manner. I say that in a way that is encouraging for people who are struggling with reading, because it can be done. But now we have so many tools in place and resources that you don't have to be 2 grades below.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, technology has it so that no one should be walking around functionally illiterate if we invest in some time and resources.
I
And my
agree.
frustration came, I mean, you've got to remember, so in my time coming up, upon a graduation, you either went to college or in the military. Those were your choices.
Yes.
So our parents and grandparents said, listen, you're either going in the service, you're going to try to get a job, or you're going to go to college. Well, many of my colleagues or friends, they all went into the Marines. So I said, let me try this college thing to see how I do. I was so afraid because I knew I had performed so poorly in high school. I'm thinking, like, it's no way I can go to college and pass.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I went to college, I actually enjoyed the independency and the environment because it was so conducive to learning. I said, if I try a little bit harder, I can get this.
Yeah.
and so I just partnered with friends and got with people who were smarter than me, and really applied myself. And I think that is the key to encouraging people, is to be able to apply yourself and having the desire. I
Yes.
think that's first and foremost. Once you have the desire, you'll find a way to apply those things, and then things will come into your circle to help you out as you're moving along, I believe.
One thing that I'm trying to do, and it's in its beginning stages. I'm trying to introduce a reading initiative to barbershops, through barbershops and beauty salons. And certainly it's not an original idea. I've read a couple of places where different people are doing this. And I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but basically what they're doing, one brother, he's, in his barbershop, as he is cutting the little boy's hair, he has the little boy, has the little boy read to him while he's cutting his hair. If that boy reads to him, he gets a free haircut.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm trying to introduce something along those lines in the neighboring communities and where I live. What's your opinion about programs like that?
Well, it's interesting that you add, because we actually currently now we've done very well. We launched a couple of years ago. We began a campaign of really tackling the problem of illiteracy. And what did we do? We went back to what I just mentioned. We went back to the basics. Now, we have a software program that allows kids to go back and learn the basic phonics. It's on the computer. And when you have kids, it's animated. It's very good because, most kids today can use a computer as
Yes.
early as 4 and 5 years old.
Absolutely.
And so what you're talking about sounds like something that you can incorporate where you are, just like in barbershops. We're in some churches. We're in some community activist places, some nonprofit agencies. And what you do is you open up your own reading center. But I'm going to tell you the critical part that we have to do. Kids have to have a thorough diagnostic assessment. See, unfortunately, the school systems misdiagnose our kids. Just like we misdiagnose kids in mental health, it's the same thing in school. So when you start to get into resources and softwares for enhancing reading, you have a diagnostic assessment. What does that mean? Well, that tells you that Johnny may be a little stronger in phonics, but he may be a little weak in reading comprehension, or his acquisition may be a little weak. And so the software is used on a daily basis where that can increase and strengthen those areas that Johnny has done. So for you and others who are listening, you can open up your own reading center. And all you need is the computer. We've done it with people in confines of their home. In their offices. Barbershops would be a great place. It's an exodus of people that come through there. All you have to do is get the software and sit down with a child just a few minutes a day, and you'll start to have them practice some of those areas in which they're weak in after they have the diagnostic assessment.
What is the name of the software?
Our website is testourkids.com. That's kids with an S.com. When you go to that website, you can surf the web there and see samples of the animation and the programs that are really geared towards helping kids. Kids like cartoons. It has sounds. It has all kind of games. But the games are as a tutorial for their reading based on their diagnostic outcome. And those are the kind of things that you do. Listen, you can open up your own reading center where you are.
Mm-hmm.
You can have kids come in, get tested, but also have kids to sit down daily for a few minutes a day and work on the areas that they need for their reading comprehension. That's something that you can do. In fact, that's something that I pledge a lot of people do, because people are saying, well, what can I do? And, people ask me all the time, well, I got kids in my class. John don't read that well. If I was in a classroom, and this is a true story,
mm-hmm.
there were 29 kids in this class. Wow. I think it was a science class. And the teacher started going around, and they would say next, and she was talking about reading. So the kids who didn't feel comfortable, who couldn't read well, would say pass. So I kept asking the teacher after they finished, I said, why did they say pass? And she said, they can't read. So out of 29 kids, 19 kids said pass. So I said, why are you sitting in the classroom? I asked the teacher this, and 19 of your 29 students can't read. Why are you allowing that? Of course, she didn't like that, but, that's the kind of stuff where you got to ask people, if you're sitting in class and 19 out of 29 kids can't read, what are you doing? The school is not going to do nothing. Listen, man, they're following this Common Core stuff that is garbage.
Yeah.
We have to do things outside. It's the only way.
Yeah, there's a saying. I first heard it from one of my heroes, Dr. Steve Perry. He's also a friend of the show. And he said, nobody's coming to save us.
That's right. Nobody's
coming to save us. That's exactly why, to my point, my previous point, we have to do this ourselves, whether it's through the church or the community or the community organizations or whatever. We have to do this. We have to take charge. We have to be responsible. And, as far as our children reading, as far as adults in our community that can't read, if you want to even take it a little further than that, even responsible for our own financial fiscability and financial health, we have to take the bull by the horns and do this, because if we don't, we're going to produce a generation that is not going to be able to read, not going to be able to comprehend, therefore not being able to function, and they're going to fill those prisons that were built since boys in the third grade couldn't read. And that's where we're headed.
And that's where we're headed. And the late, great Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better.
That's right.
And when you know better, if you know better, you do. Go to some of these customer service where these kids, these young people are working. I said to a young lady one day, I said something about making residual cash, starting a business. We had gotten in the conversation. She said, what is that? I mean, she was a college grad. She was a college kid in college, and she was like, what is residual? I mean, not a difficult word, but residual is constant. That's money that's constantly coming in. And just if you go to some fast food restaurants, and if you're going through, the kids just act dense, man. They cannot comprehend.
Yeah.
And a lot of these kids, because they can't read, their communication is weak. And so when your communication is weak, then you tend not to be able to verbalize how you really feel. And that becomes a problem when you get stopped by the law.
Yep.
It's a problem when you're in conflict resolution.
Yep.
Okay. It's a problem when you're in school and you want to express an opinion, because you cannot do effectively because your verbal skills are weak. So, it's just, let's do something about it. People are listening now. Go to the website, get in contact with testoutkids.com. Find out what they're doing. But because I know people on the phone listening now, and children in your class, in your school district who cannot read. But the mere fact that you sitting on this phone tonight, listening to me and telling you these statistics, and you hang this phone up and don't do nothing about it, you should find some more work, because you are hurting our kids. And when I decided to get on this campaign a couple of years ago, I said there's no turning back. When I realized, because I'm telling you right now, I didn't know these numbers were as staggering as they are.
Yeah.
I mean, just being in the field, you tell most people that they won't believe that. Because when I first told you, you was like, wow.
Yeah.
You probably said that can't be true. Go to the Department of Education, U.S. Department of Education, and look at their stats for fourth grade children in this country. I'm not making this up.
Yeah.
So, let's start to do something and stop talking about it and taking the action to move forward because it's getting worse.
Speaking
So,
about taking action, you've written two books. One, Overcoming Obstacles, and The Act of Changes, and The
yeah.
Act of Change. If you could please speak about those two books.
Yeah. Well, Overcoming Obstacles, Beating the Odds was a book that was 28 years in the making.
Wow.
And that book was 28 years of silence. See, many of us grow up, and particularly our communities, we didn't talk about things that happened to you because they were taboo. Things that happened in our communities, you were told not to talk about. It was always shh, hush, hush. And so when I finally decided to write about the book, the first book, it was sort of a healing process for me because I said, well, wow, I've gone through these things. Maybe if I put this down in the form of a book, some people will read this and say, wow, my story is similar to his, because we all have a story.
Yes.
And many of us are afraid, embarrassed, ashamed to talk about things that happened to us, which is quite understanding because I was. That's why it took me 28 years to write it. The act of change was about making changes in your life that are so difficult. Like people, the word change frightens a lot of people. And when you talk about changing just anything, any remote thing, people run from that word. And so because I had gone through some serious turmoil in my life over the last 5 or 6 years, I said, wow, let me talk about 9 things that people could use if they are willing to make some changes in their life. Read this story, read this material, and then I guarantee you some of these things can speak to, we all, if you look yourself in the mirror, can think about one thing that we like to change about ourselves. And that's what Active Change is about. So the two books are really about a movement, if you will, about exposing, telling a story, but inspiring and empowering people to make a difference in their lives. But also, why be selfish if you've done well? Why not share that so somebody else can become successful?
Please feel free to plug your website and or any other project you're involved in.
Sure. Well, you can catch me at DrAngeloReynolds.com. That's my website. And also, again, for the reading centers, which I strongly suggest that listeners begin to go there and look at testourkids.com to begin to look at our software, what we're doing with reading centers, how you can become a part of it. That's what I want people to do. Go there and let's start doing something about this illiteracy with our children. The first step is action, and that's what I want people to do.